Hirsch, and this is EdCast, a program created and produced by educators for everyone interested in education. Today's program is being recorded in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic. We are maintaining social distancing and speaking to you from our homes. In a STEM-centered world, the humanities can be overlooked as students seek to enter career fields that they believe are more lucrative. Yet the humanities are central to creating the kind of critical thinkers and problem solvers so needed today. In recognition of the value of the humanities, the CUNY Graduate Center recently received a multi-million-dollar grant from the Mellon Foundation to expand the CUNY Humanities Alliance, a program designed to engage doctoral students in supporting humanities education at CUNY community colleges. Today, EdCast speaks with the leaders of the CUNY Humanities Alliance to find out how the grant will foster innovative teaching and learning in the humanities. But first, I previously had the opportunity to speak with David Gomez, the president of Hostos Community College, about the importance of the humanities and the benefits of this grant to Hostos. Now on EdCast. In today's very STEM-focused world, where all we really hear about is science and technology, is there still a value in humanities education?
Absolutely. I mean, these things are not mutually exclusive. The presumption is that the study of the STEM fields leads to critical thinking, problem solving, and analysis, when the fact of the matter is it's been long established in education that those traits really come from the study of the humanities and not exclusively in the area of STEM. And for us as a community college, where the presumption is that our focus should be on technical education and preparing young men and women for jobs, those jobs are yet to be defined. So we need to ensure that they are able to think critically, analyze, assess where we are as a culture and a society, and be able to contribute at a level beyond just technical solutions.
What do you say to students, and not just here, but on many campuses, who say, well, I don't need this humanities course because I'm a math major. I don't need this because I'm in computer science. What do we say to students like that who really feel they don't even want to engage with the humanities?
Well, I will say to the students what I've said to many of my colleagues in education in general and higher education in particular. We are the first generation of educators that are charged with the task of preparing students for careers that don't exist yet. Now, how does one do that precisely? And the way you do it, in my estimation, is by focusing on those skills that are transferable. Transferable skills come from the humanities. Again, if we are preparing young men and women to actively participate not just in the workforce, but in running this society, in government, in civic engagement, that requires a broader thinking and understanding of different cultures and understanding of how we arrived at some of the conclusions that we have historically. And every time we have those discussions, it leads us right back to the humanities.
What do you see then as the key benefits of this grant to our institution?
Well, one thing, it will incentivize faculty to consider careers in the humanities. Looping back to your initial question, with such a strong focus on the STEM professions, we hear more and more young people thinking about careers in areas that are not necessarily related to the humanities. And that, I think, would be a serious mistake. So to get young professionals to consider careers in this area is pivotal, because if not, we could find ourselves with a real dearth of talent in an area, I should say, that is critically needed. So to first shine a spotlight on this activity, the notion that community colleges in particular, but community college students in the South Bronx have either no interest in or cannot handle the classics is absurd on its face.
Joining me today is Kaysi Holman. She is the Director of Programs and Administration for the CUNY Humanities Alliance. She has extensive experience working with nonprofits and educational organizations dedicated to equity and social justice. She is a political advocate, community organizer, and a lawyer. Katina Rogers is co-director of the CUNY Humanities Alliance and the Futures Initiative at the CUNY Graduate Center. She mentors graduate fellows, develops programming, and has administrative oversight over all aspects of the program. Her book, Putting the Humanities PhD to Work, Thriving in and Beyond the Classroom, will be published this summer. Luke Waltzer is the co-director of the CUNY Humanities Alliance and director of the Teaching and Learning Center at the CUNY Graduate Center. He also works on pedagogical and digital projects and serves as director of community projects for the CUNY Academic Commons. Thank you all for joining me today on EdCast. It's such a pleasure to have you with us. We opened up the program with a brief interview with President David Gomez, and in which he speaks very eloquently, I believe, to the value of the humanities and why he is excited about Hostos being part of the grant. But I want to step back just a bit and ask you first, what is the CUNY Humanities Alliance?
Hi, Linda. Thanks so much for having us all today.
All right, thanks for joining us.
The CUNY Humanities Alliance is supported by the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation and was launched in 2016, placing graduate students from the Graduate Center in instructional roles in CUNY's community colleges. Because of the ways that the Graduate Center teaching fellowships have traditionally been structured, Graduate Center students have taught primarily in CUNY's senior colleges, and the community college experience has historically been underrepresented in the conversations about career paths and the humanities at the Graduate Center. So the Humanities Alliance was created to expand teaching opportunities for Graduate Center students to additional kinds of institutions, and to do so in ways that ensured that the students were deeply supported in their work and that the Graduate Center could learn from those students' experiences in ways that filtered into a variety of programs, starting with the Teaching and Learning Center and the Futures Initiative. The first iteration of the grant, which is concluding next month, placed Graduate Center students as faculty of record at LaGuardia Community College. And the next grant period, which commences this summer, expands those placements to 3 additional community colleges, to Hostos Community College, Gutman Community College, and Borough of Manhattan Community College, and places students in instructional support roles, broadening the kinds of engagement in the humanities that are at the heart of the program.
So that's, and of course, that's a nice expansion, and we're going to talk a little bit later about what LaGuardia did when they worked with you. But Katina, I want to ask you, so when the doctoral students come on these campuses, what will they be doing?
Sure. So the roles that they're in will vary. And the premise of the grant, as Luke was saying, is that humanities education matters for all students. And it happens not only inside of our classrooms, but also in the structures and cultures where those classrooms are embedded. So places like writing centers and centers for teaching and learning and other departmental and institutional structures, digital pedagogy, spaces where open educational resources are being developed. All of those spaces really support humanities education as well. And what we've been finding is that graduate students don't always have an opportunity to see behind the curtain of what happens in those spaces during their studies. And it can be a really exciting and intellectually stimulating place to work. And so our goal is to strengthen the elements of humanities education that do take place beyond the classroom. And in doing so, we hope to also equip graduate students and undergraduate students for all of the futures that may await them.
In the opening to our program, President David Gomez made reference to the fact that he feels there are myths surrounding the community college students' interest in the humanities, and that many people feel they're not important to community college students and they don't value them. What do you say to that?
Anyone who works with community college students knows that they are poets, filmmakers, storytellers, artists, and musicians and actors, in general, creative thinkers. Humanities education enables students to navigate the complex realities of their personal and professional lives. In CUNY, community college students represent more than 100 different languages and countries. And many community college students in CUNY are the first in their families to go to college. Most of them have at least one part-time job. These are multilingual and multicultural people. Community college students in New York City live and breathe multifaceted positionalities and identities. They are fluent in code switching long before they know the term. Studying literature, history, philosophy, art, music, theater, and more provides them the ability to more fully understand and articulate their own experiences within a broader societal context. Especially now, or even now, with the pandemic, when biological sciences and statistical projections are at peak importance, the students are expressing and understanding their daily lived realities through making short films, through poetry, through music and art. These media are the way that we as a society are processing this global event.
So one of the things, again, that many of you have already referenced, is this idea of preparing teachers to work in the humanities. And I know that's a big part of what Luke is doing as well. Why is that so critical to the work of this grant?
Well, teaching is a craft, and it's also a field of scholarship, and new teachers should be supported and welcomed into a community of practice in a way that makes them feel part of something that's larger than what happens in their own classroom, so that the curriculum are connected to an institution and to the communities beyond that institution. And at the Teaching and Learning Center, we really, because we're working with graduate students who are deeply engaged in the cutting edge scholarship in their field, and assembling their identity from their engagements and from with senior scholars at the Graduate Center and all the work that they're doing around their degree pursuit. We really have an opportunity to help those students create a foundation upon which they can grow as scholars and educators. And in that foundation, we encourage them to understand that learning doesn't just happen in individual interactions with students, but in the ways, as Katina was saying, that they navigate and experience the institution. And the work of the Teaching and Learning Center, the Futures Initiative, and the Humanities Alliance exposes graduate students to those realities and gives them opportunities to engage critically and analytically with those structures.
And we don't always think about graduate student education preparation. And I will say that it's some of the things that grad students feel they don't get enough preparation for as we send them out to all of our campuses. Just to go back to that idea just quickly and briefly. So why was graduate education reform such a big part of what you were doing now? Katina, why is that the key point here?
Sure. I think that one of the things that's really unique about graduate students is that they are in a unique dual role as both teachers and learners at the same time. So they're at this moment of transition between the life of a student and the life of a professional, whether that's a faculty member or in any other pathway that they choose. They represent the next generation, not only of faculty members and professors, but of intellectual leaders more broadly. Our hope is that by working to reform the structures and also the values of higher education, that we may also create the possibility for lasting institutional change as these graduate students go forward in their careers. And one thing that I think is really important about this being located at CUNY in particular is that the Graduate Center serves the larger university and by extension New York City in a way that I have not seen anywhere else. I think we all know, being so deeply a part of CUNY, that it's the lifeblood of New York City. There's 500,000 students across the 5 boroughs, and students at the Graduate Center are teaching thousands of these students every year. So our hope is that the skills and approaches that doctoral students are learning at the Graduate Center are essential not only to their own studies and careers, but also to the undergraduates whom they're teaching. And so we feel that we owe it to CUNY and to the city to develop the most creative, meaningful, and expansive models for what graduate education can look like. And we hope that this moves us in that direction.
So these graduate students are working with students on campuses, and I know that the first iteration of the Mellon grant focused on LaGuardia. We have a really wonderful video that we're about to show. It's a film that was done. If you can set it up for us a little bit and tell us what we're going to be looking at.
Yeah, so as you said, the new CUNY Humanities Alliance program builds on the incredible work of the current program, the partnership between the Graduate Center and Laguardia, also generously supported by the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation. It also builds on the strengths of the Futures Initiative and the Teaching and Learning Center at the Graduate Center, both of which have become profound resources for graduate students. In the current program, the CUNY Humanities Alliance both helped graduate students prepare to teach in community colleges, in that context, and also broaden and strengthen interest in the humanities among community college students. We did that both through the courses that the graduate fellows and faculty mentors were teaching, and also through an undergraduate leadership program called the Laguardia Mellon Humanities Scholars. In that program, LaGuardia students, or as part of that program, they designed and created a year-long humanities project, individual projects, that they would then publicly showcase at the end of the year. Throughout the year, they would get feedback from faculty mentors and their peers to help them further develop their projects. And it was our hope, of course, that the projects would not only help the students in their own aspirations, but also be meaningful to the greater community as well. And, you know, when we talk about student projects, we often have this view that they are, you know, simple student papers or like posters or very, very sort of simple projects. But the projects that we're talking about here for the humanities scholars are much larger scale and really take hold of the ambitions and the aspirations of these students, because they are the ones who are designing and creating them. So this film that we're seeing is a short film created, developed by Sebastian Sepulveda, one of our LaGuardia scholars, last year. And it is about the experience of being an undocumented student in New York City. And it's just beautiful. It's one of the many beautiful pieces that we showcase every year.
Yo creo que el tener documentos en sí no es un impedimento a dejar de hacer las cosas que tú quieres hacer. Porque al final, si tú no arriesgas nada, no vas a ganar nada. Y como dice mi madre, es mejor tener el 50% de algo que el 100% de nada. Es como un ejemplo de vida, ¿sabes? Porque así como ella arriesgó muchas cosas para intentar darnos lo mejor de todo para mí, para mis hermanos, así mismo estoy arriesgando yo hoy en hacer lo que a mí me gusta por tener un futuro mejor, tanto como para mí, como para mi familia.
That's a very moving excerpt from what was a very moving and compelling film. We just saw a very small part of it. You also did a lot of work with students. I guess it's part of the same idea of self-identity and who we are and how we appear to others and how people judge us. And so I'd like to look at some other work that was also done with these students. And tell us a little about that. I think one is called The Shape of You. And then we have some gifts. So tell us a little bit about those as well.
Absolutely. So the CUNY Humanities Alliance supports an engaged, innovative pedagogy that honors and utilizes students' experiences as not just relevant to, but foundational for deeply understanding scholarly theories. So both of these student works are examples of early assignments in courses that the graduate fellows were teaching, focused around multilingualism. So one is an English composition course and the other is an introductory linguistics course. They both are ways of soliciting students' artistic expression of their experiences and identities, a way to express sort of who they are and where they come from. And also collectively, they become a representation of the cultural, linguistic, and ethnic backgrounds that everyone is bringing into the classroom. So in the one assignment called Linguistic Shape of You was created by Khadijah Martin for her composition course called Multilingual Voices. Multilingual Voices focused on multilingualism and multiculturalism, and particularly linguistic diversity beyond named languages. So how does it work with multiple dialects, even within English? So Trinidadian Creole and Patois and American Vernacular, and sort of how are those hierarchies shaped? So in this example, students are utilizing color and space and words to represent themselves and their linguistic space, the words they use to describe themselves and their identities, on sort of pre-outlined bodies that they could choose from different shapes and color in. So it was a profound way of getting self-portraits of the students, and then the students were able to build on these. So they wrote about their own representations, responded to each other's representations, and then those written pieces became part of a later writing composition for the course. So in the other assignment called Diversity Through Portraits, created by Inez Vaño Garcia and teaching artist Ryan Seslow for Inez's course, Linguistic Landscapes, Unpacking Language Hierarchies, students are attempting to show different cultural, linguistic, and ethnic backgrounds through this sort of gift the portrait work that they're doing. So each student took their own portrait and made it into a GIF using technology. And they also, this was the starting point to a conversation about linguistic diversity in Queens, in New York, even inside the classrooms.
Those are really wonderful. We really enjoyed them. There was so much that you sent us, but this is just a small sampling. So this idea then of supporting teaching and learning, I want to go back to this with Luke for a moment. It's all well and good to say we're going to put out a new generation of graduate students who are really great teachers in the classroom. What are some of the supports that you are building into this pedagogy?
Great. So humanities work doesn't just happen in our classrooms. We've said that a few times so far today. And some of the most exciting spaces I think that Kaysi and Katina and I have experienced in our navigation through the academy are the support spaces where conversations and community can build around humanities instruction. We're thinking about the WAC programs that you know very well, Linda. You've been leading one at Hostos for a generation now, and that's trained a series of graduate students into a particular set of methods that are broadly applicable for creating foundations for undergraduate students to grow within the humanities. And then it's supported faculty members who are looking for dialogic ways to develop and integrate new kinds of engagement into their courses. There's also, over the past decade at CUNY, a variety of spaces to talk about and support digital pedagogy and instructional design. There's been a growth of experiential learning opportunities. There's been mentorship, both peer and near-peer mentorship systems that have been set up, which energize humanities projects on campuses. Over the past 4 years, there's been a major investment in open educational resources. And in our assessment offices and in our grants programs, there are opportunities for graduate students to learn about how the humanities informs that work as well. So the idea here is to, by broadening to additional graduate center, CUNY community college campuses, and by expanding into the variety of spaces that humanities work is happening in those institutions, we can broaden the preparation that graduate center students have and their perspective on the ways that their humanities degree can equip them for a variety of careers.
I also noticed that the grant is seeking to address reform efforts that are related to equity, inclusion, evaluation, and labor. And we're running out of time, but Katina, if you could just tell us briefly how that's going to be done.
Sure. I mean, we think that this is really important in terms of the possibility for lasting change that emerges from the grant. We think that this grant provides an opportunity to create new structures that support several of these reform efforts at once, that address the broader landscape, in addition to having a really concrete vision for how to move forward. And so, you know, in looking at questions like the increased reliance on adjunct labor that is true at nearly every university, if not every university and college across the United States, how that affects student learning, how that affects graduate students and their possibilities for the future. Looking at diminishing public funding, something that we know is an immediate and urgent concern at CUNY. How does that undermine the work that teachers and staff and students are all trying to do? We look at gender bias and racism that continue to be deeply problematic both for students and for faculty and for staff. And we try to find ways that we can develop greater equity, both within the structures that already exist and how we can imagine new structures going forward. So we know that no single project can accomplish this, but our hope is that this grant will help to stitch together some elements that are often considered separately. And I think that even just by addressing all of these questions in the same breath, it creates new opportunities to see across the broader landscape and to move towards lasting change.
So if we could just very briefly, if I can ask you, what are your greatest expectations for this expansion of the grant moving forward?
Good question. We're really excited about building on the great partnership we've had with LaGuardia Community College and extending that into 3 additional partners. We think that we're going to intensify even more the conversations about community college careers and opportunities within the context of the Graduate Center. And I think we have an opportunity to build partnerships with our community college colleagues that create all sorts of opportunities for experimentation, collaboration, sharing, and collective growth throughout the institution. So we see building on the great successes of the first iteration of the grant and continuing to build energy in ways that filter into a variety of spaces and facilitate a lot of learning.
I think we're actually running out of time, so I want to thank you all for joining me today. Before we leave, we want to end with some concluding words from Hostos President David Gomez. We want to thank all of our viewers for joining us today, and we wish you and your families all the best. And of course, we hope there will soon be better times for us all. See you next time on EdCast. So what would you like to see as the outcome of Hostos' participation in the CUNY Humanities Alliance?
Simply put, I would really like us to shift our focus, not just as an institution, but as a university, to what it really means to be an educated man or woman. We have, in my estimation, bowed to the pressures of job preparation, career preparation, and I believe that that's short-sighted. When we consider who is an educated man or woman, we look at people who are well-read, who are literate, who can think critically, who can compare and contrast not just the literature, but cultures and history and art and music, and bring those to bear on solving 21st century problems. With all due respects, that is not going to be solved, or those problems are not going to be addressed by a very strong career orientation. So in my fondest dreams, it would be that we would return to a broader definition of what constitutes an educated person. And when we as an institution confer a degree on a young man or woman, that we understand what that means, and when we send them out into the world, that they're better prepared to engage in the 21st century.
I'd like to hear from you. Please send your thoughts and comments to cunyedcast@gmail.com.